Hello, welcome to Child Development 195, Chapter 5, Readiness for Change and Learning Through Inquiry. In this chapter, we're going to be looking to see how ready a teacher is for change. Change can be a really scary thing to a lot of people, and other people accept change with great vigor and excitement. So we're going to go over some of those things about identifying change stages and adapting to responses. We're also going to go over the observe, apply, reflect cycle of inquiry, and also understanding that change process. So those are the main topics and highlights we're going to cover in this chapter. And you'll be able to kind of think of yourself, how ready you are for change, and are you ready to move forward in the mentoring process. Introduction here, the chapter focuses on ways for mentors to match professional development strategies to meet individual teacher needs. So we all know that each and every teacher that we're going to come across, whether we're mentoring them or we are supervising them, each one has completely different needs. And I know I've worked with people over many, many years and have had to learn how, what can I say, what can I do, how can I do this with each individual person to know how to best meet their needs to better our early childhood programs. Some teachers might not yet be ready to start a mentoring relationships, while others are ready to start building on some short-term goals and say, yes, I'm ready to hit it. I'm ready to move on. So when you're really wanting to learn about something, what is the first thing that comes to mind? So let's say somebody puts something new in front of you and you really want to learn about it. You're excited to learn about it. The first things that usually come to mind are those things like questioning, wondering, I wonder what would happen if I did this or if I did that. So think about maybe like a science activity that you're doing with children and somebody shows it to you. And you're like, wow, how did they do that? How did that happen? How did they get that reaction to take place? Some of those things. And then you start searching for answers. I wonder what the science is behind that. So, wondering that questioning, there's many times where I will ask a question. This is a great one in our house where, I'll just come up with some questions. I'll just ask my husband some questions. He's like, I don't know the answers. I'm like, I'm not necessarily expecting you to know the answers to all the questions. It's just that I'm asking these questions. I just have these questions about. So, because generally speaking, I want to learn about something new. So those are really important things that if you have somebody who is wondering, who's questioning, who's searching for answers, you're probably on the right track. And this is probably somebody who really will want to be mentored and that you'll probably have a good, successful relationship with. The chapter also talks about the Perry Preschool Project. It's really called the HighScope Perry Preschool Project. And hopefully you watched the TED Talk video at the beginning, the media release part of this module. So before you actually listen to this chapter, hopefully you read the textbook first and you went, I wonder what, maybe you had that question, I wonder what the Perry Preschool Project is. And then hopefully I gave you some information there, a couple different sources. One, it was the video, and it actually, if you noticed that it did make mention of the other projects that were also talked about in your textbook, as well as a Head Start project and some state preschool projects that they've been working on. So it talks about really the research for teacher development and research in our field. And if you're not familiar with the Perry Preschool Project, make sure that you do go back and listen to that, at least listen to the video. And again, there's the HighScope website also to review and research. But it's an incredible project. I learned about it years and years and years ago when it was still going on, and basically breaking up two groups of two groups of children into different preschool models. And what they found over this longitudinal study, a 40-year study, which is incredible to follow somebody for 40 years, was that the the curriculum, what they did in the Perry Preschool Project, had benefits that lasted a lifetime. And that's really why we're here and why we're in this field, because we know that the impact for a young child early on in their life can have lasting effects throughout their entire life. So lower crime rates, higher income, more education, all those things that we're looking at for people to be successful adults and successful in their careers and in life. Um, Understanding and adapting to teacher readiness for change. Not all teachers are open and willing to build a mentoring relationship, and you have to be aware of that. The mentor must meet the teacher at their readiness for change. So it's important for us not to say, hey, I mean, I can tend to be a little excited at times and a little like, oh, yes, we can do this, we can do this. And some people are not necessarily ready for that. So we have to be aware and meet them where they're at in their state of readiness. The trans theoretical model of behavior change was that example that was given in the textbook about the, stop smoking example. And with that, not everybody is necessarily all ready to stop smoking. It's one of those things that, you have to know when a person's ready for something. So for instance, you might have had you yourself, or maybe others in your family, your parents, aunts or uncles or siblings or something like that smoke, and and maybe you've been trying to get them to smoke, or you've been trying to stop smoking yourself. But you have to really be in that place and time to to be ready to stop something. Like, okay, I'm going to do this, and this is really important to me. The same thing goes true with somebody who might be drinking or overeating, or somebody who has other habits in which they want to habits or addictions that they really do want to stop. Okay, this is kind of the end of the line. This is what I want to do. I want to stop. I want to make this change in my life. I know this was probably about 8 or 9 years ago that I used to be a Mountain Dew drinker. I love Mountain Dew. And I'd have at least one a day, usually with my lunch and everything. I wouldn't drink it pretty much more or less, but all of a sudden one day it was like, you know what, I'm done drinking soda. I'm done putting the high fructose corn syrup in my body. I don't need the caffeine. I don't need the extra sugar. And so one day I just said, you know what, I'm not drinking any more soda. And since that point in time, it didn't really get to a point of, totally affecting my health or anything, but I had to make that decision that I want to make that change in my life. And was it a tough couple weeks? Oh yeah, it was a tough couple weeks, especially with the caffeine and so forth. And I don't drink coffee. I don't drink tea. I don't really drink anything else with caffeine. Not to say that I couldn't, but I just don't like the taste of those things. But I was ready for that change at that point in time in my life, and just stopped cold turkey. And over the course of time, I didn't have an addiction. But over the course of time, my son will be like, hey mom, try this. Maybe it's a different kind of soda or something like that. And anytime now that I try any carbonated drink, I just have a little taste of it. It feels like it's like burning my tongue, like it's exploding in my mouth, just because I'm not, used to that carbonation anymore. So it's a really good model of behavior change. So, and knowing that, each individual has to have that readiness in order to make that change. And that's what we're looking at for our teachers as well, especially in our early childhood programs. Are they ready to start making some changes? The ECE teachers have a lot of outside factors that can definitely play a role in determining their readiness for change. So, for instance, finances. We all know that our field is a low-paying field. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And it's one of those things that, making a minimum wage or slightly above minimum wage is something that can really put a lot of pressure on somebody, for their finances. We also know that many women are in our field. Sometimes it's a second income, but many times I don't know, my hats go off to you if you are a single parent mother in this field, and you are so dedicated to this field, because I know it must be extremely difficult financially for you, because I know it has been for me over the years. And I know that it must be incredibly difficult. So that's something that, okay, I'm not ready to change because, I gotta make sure I have my job. I gotta make sure I have this. I gotta make sure I have that. Make sure, I can pay my bills and so forth. And it can be very, very difficult. So making sure that finances are in place can be one of those things to inhibit somebody from making that ready, being ready to make change. Academic preparation. So again, if especially if somebody only has, for instance, if we're talking about somebody who has 12 units in early childhood, and they're the lead teacher in the classroom, we know that, that's not enough preparation in order for them to be a high quality teacher. So they definitely need a mentor, but they might feel intimidated by it. So it's one of those things to meet them at their level to see if they are ready for change. And in those cases and situations, I'd probably suggest a lot more classes also to take in addition to the mentoring process. Emotional exhaustion, it is incredibly emotionally exhausting to work in a classroom with young children. I'm sure you've all been there. I know I have over the course of time. And I remember, I know coming home, it's like, okay, I am not only physically exhausted, but I'm mentally exhausted. I'm emotionally exhausted because, over the years, I've had to report many different families to Child Protective Services, CPS. It's heartbreaking. One time I had a parent come to me who said, my husband's beating me and I need to get out of the house. I don't know what to do. At that point in time, I was working in a Head Start program, and she had her son with her, and I ended up, taking them in my car to a safe house, and then from there, I don't know what happened to them. This was actually my first year of full-time teaching, and I got guidance from my supervisor and so forth. And at that point in time in our program, being the teacher, I was also basically like their social service provider as well. So that's why taking them in my car was acceptable at that point. But oh my gosh, totally emotional exhaustion. Then I'm kind of like, okay, well, I did all this, and I know that this is the best thing for the mother and the son. But it came down to, the dad comes back to me and is like, well, the last time, you were the last ones to see my wife and son. I know she went to go pick him up at school, and now she's not home. And, a couple days later, he called, and that was extremely, nerve wracking. And I honestly could say, I don't know where she's at. I honestly do not know where she's at. I have not seen her, and I don't know where she's at, because if you, take someone to a safe house, they get moved from there very quickly, and it's all, of course, confidential and everything. So I honestly had no idea where she was at. So, example of emotional exhaustion that can possibly happen. Family commitments, of course, if you have young children, you probably have some outside family commitments as well. And life responsibilities. Is your child sick? Are you the one who has to, call in sick in order to stay with your sick child? And then do they need to find a substitute for you? So all of those different things. Or, for instance, like myself right now, I'm dealing with my mom and my in-laws who, have some health issues. So doing the opposite end of that too. Sometimes at one point in time, I had my son, who at that point was 3, 4, 5 years old, and my dad, who had Alzheimer's, and we were, trying to balance the two. So, family commitments, life responsibilities can really play a role. At that point in time, I did not volunteer for a lot of extra things because I knew, where I was able to say yes and say no to. Cultural relevance, is this something that's important culturally to be a teacher, to be in the field? Do you find that, being that ready for change, is that something that is part of a culture in which somebody comes from? Program support, is there enough program support there? Are they supporting the teacher to be working with a mentor? Or if you being the mentor, is your program with the teacher as well. But at this point in time, we're really talking about is the teacher's program supportive, and allowing that person to take time off or to meet, to have time to meet and so forth with the mentor. And then also, is this something that's voluntary or mandatory? So, hopefully it's a voluntary situation for mentoring, but occasionally it could be mandatory because there could be a director or a supervisor saying, "Look, you've got to get mentored here, otherwise you're not going to have a job anymore." So, again, you tend to be more ready for change if it's a voluntary situation. If somebody says, basically do it or else, doesn't really make somebody as open for that change. There are certain stages of change, and when we look at the stages of change, we're looking at pre-contemplation. So these people, as you could read in your book, there's a lot of information there. They're really not ready for the change. They're not ready to to risk, make that take that step, make that risk. If you noticed on the quote of the week was about risk. We do have to have some risk in our lives in order to be successful. But sometimes I'm just not ready. No, not ready. Not seeing it yet. Contemplation, thinking about it. Oh yeah, but overwhelmed by the obstacles. So, for instance, just even I can think of some of these things just in my own life with. I wanted, for instance, I wanted to take a sabbatical, time to study something further and in depth, but that means I would have to, really get released from all my classes, from the lab school and everything, and basically have a semester just to work on that project. And for myself right now, I'm not ready to make that change. I really love what I do. It would be great to be able to do that, but I'm just not, I'm not ready for it yet. Contemplation, thinking about the change, but overwhelmed by the obstacles, and that I'm probably between those two, knowing that there's so many obstacles to overcome, that so many things of getting subs, who can teach this class, who could do this, who could do that, that I'm just not quite ready to take that on. So as a mentor, in these first two stages, they're really not ready for that risk. But you do need to support them. You need to listen and be a role model in these two stages. Make sure that you let them see how professional development is a benefit, and how getting the mentoring could really be beneficial to them in their classroom. This might also be a time when you want to do more observation. And but if the teacher is not ready for making that change, then you need to make sure that you respect their wishes. Okay, be respectful of that. Preparation. So, okay, yeah, I'm ready to make a change, ready to think about this, ready to move forward. The next step is action. So that's when we're actively engaged in change. And then finally, maintenance. So maintaining change with vigilance. In these, in the preparation, action, and maintenance stages, we want to make us feel like, that we're making the right choice to be a mentor. So it's like, oh yes, okay, they're ready, huh? Okay, great, I can help with this. Action, actively engaged in change. That's when you're going to be seeking out. You're going to be doing observations. You're going to be getting resources together. You're going to be giving feedback and so forth. The rewards are definitely greater than the risks for them there. So you really have to look at each thing. So each thing comes along. So I just gave you the example about sabbatical, but a couple years ago it came up that we had a retirement at the lab school, and our coordinator retired, and it was like, okay, well, who's going to take over a position, because the college takes forever to hire somebody full time. And so at that point in time, I was like, that was something that I was ready to make the change for. I was ready to take that task on, because I knew we were moving to a new site and everything. And I was actively engaged with it, maintained it for a couple of years. I learned so much during that process, because I had been out of being a lead coordinator for 15 years or so. But I was ready for that change. I was like, yeah, I took it on. I was like, yeah, I'm excited about it. I do, now that we hired a coordinator, I do sometimes miss that, that, oh man, I miss being up there as much as I used to be the last couple years. So, but at that point in time, I was ready to make that change. So meet somebody where they're at, okay, for this process of change. Um, when we know that a teacher, when we know a teacher's stage for change, then we're better able to meet them at their level, meet them at their needs, and that's something that we definitely want to do. This helps reduce a mentor's anxiety and frustration level because we are better able to support the teacher and adjust our behavior to match. So, like, if you're all excited about something, you're like, yeah, let's do this, and somebody's like, no, I'm not ready yet. No, I really don't want to. It makes it difficult, right? So, and then you can feel frustrated and anxious about it because it's like, how come they're not listening to me? How come they're not wanting to do this? So we need to know where they're at, and then we match them. Okay, same thing kind of with young children, right? Where are they coming into the classroom? If they're having a lot of separation anxiety, then we know where we need to match our behavior to match them. So yeah, so we want to make sure that we try to minimize that to the best of our ability. Mentoring doesn't happen overnight, of course. It takes time, and there's going to be pauses in the process. So really, actively engaged in the process, then there might be some, low times. It's kind of like the highs and the lows, where, yes, I want to learn this new thing, and then you learn it, and you get feedback on it and everything, and then you're like, okay, I really need time to process it. So I might not, I might be kind of pausing there for a while until I'm thinking of the next new thing, that next question, the next wondering that we talked about at the beginning. And if someone really doesn't want to be mentored, this might be the sign that the field of early childhood education might not be the right one for them. So watch out for these signs because, especially if you're a supervisor, because this is when other things, quality could be lacking in their classroom. Point of severity where the center might get cited for something like there would be a type A or a type B violation from community care licensing because somebody's probably doesn't really want to be there. And in this field, we know that you really have to be there. You really want to be there in order to work in the field. And I've seen that even with students going through our programs where I'm like, I don't know if they're really going to make it in this field. They're able to do the classes, they're able to complete the classes, but I don't know if their heart's in it. I don't really know if they have that strong desire to be a teacher in the field, because we know that it is extremely difficult, as we looked at all those other things, the finances, the emotional, the family commitments, all those other things that can sometimes inhibit us. So watch for these signs. Again, you have to be ready to make those changes. It has to be self-determined. The same thing, like we gave earlier with, wanting to quit smoking or drinking, or, same thing with mentoring. Somebody has to be willing and open for that change. All right. In addition to making changes to the teacher's practices in the classroom, teachers also need to have organizational and support systems. So, for instance, as a mentor, sometimes it's that, sorry, I'm in my squeaky chair again. Some people are extremely organized to the point of being too organized, and then there's other people that nothing's organized at all. So I know it's amazing. I can go into some of the storage rooms at within our different sites and different classrooms, and definitely know which teachers have a little bit more organizational, have a little more organized style versus others. Sometimes as a mentor, it might just be literally helping somebody get organized with something, and providing that support system. So I can give you examples. I know when I started off in the classroom, there would be things like, I'd have a different dramatic play box for each of my different, when I would rotate things in the classroom. And the first programs that I worked in really didn't have any center-wide materials for stuff like that. So I made my own. I created my own. I went, shopping to garage sales, to thrift stores, to, gathering stuff, recycled things and so forth, gathering materials, asking for donations, and creating my own dramatic play boxes. Same thing with some of my file folder games or my flannel stories, I'd put them in manila folders or envelopes, and then label them and have them there. So, oh wow, I can pull this one out. It's very easy. It's a very easy system. Now, some people can get a little too anal about organization, so you have to be careful. Have a balance where it's not totally taking over your life, but you do have some type of organization there. And one of my favorite stores, maybe this happens with you too, but I love the Container Store. I don't know about you, but if you've ever been down there to the Fashion Valley Container Store, oh man, I could totally go crazy in there, but I have to totally refrain from, doing too much, okay? All right, maybe we need organizational support also with lesson plans, maybe how to plan, how to rotate things. For instance, every week you should be changing something in your classroom, but not everything. So, every week you're changing, maybe half to a third. So if you have, let's say you're going to rotate and change dramatic play one week, and then I'm going to change what manipulatives we have out, and I'm going to change the language area, the materials we have for language. Then the next week I'm going to change the block area, I'm going to change what's maybe the puzzles, and then I'm going to change what we have out for like free choice art, meaning, different collage materials or something like that. And so and then, the third week, maybe I'm going to change, the sensory table, the, what's would change? The math area, and then the science area, right? So rotating those, changing those things. So you can't change. I remember I worked in a program, it was rather briefly, but I did work there for a while, and they had a new theme each week, and oh my gosh, it was just driving me nuts. I'm like, okay, you can't change everything out every week. Like, this is crazy. And they wanted a total thematic approach in the classroom. It was absolutely positively crazy. So I worked in that program briefly because it just was not a quality program. But you need to have that organization in that change. So make sure that you are, that could be some of the supports that you've learned over the course of time, over the course of years. You also need to make sure that you're giving that continuous feedback to them. Hey, this is working great, or, maybe you could try this. We want to have, of course, as well, open communication. When we're making change happen in early childhood setting, it can be very difficult and complex. So supervisors need to be ready, need to see readiness from both the organization and the individual. And I can give a couple of specific examples with this. So for instance, years ago, when was it, around 2000, give or take, and the desired results came out from the state, and being a state-funded program at the lab school, we had to pick up and figure out how to do desired results. And the teaching staff that we had at that point in time is completely different than the teaching staff we have now. And the teaching staff at that point in time was like, what? Like, we have to do observations? We have, even though they would kind of do observations informally, it was not, okay, a structured assessment tool. And I know when I first started working at the lab school, I was actually creating my own, because I came from a very structured program with Head Start for assessments and so forth, to something that had like nothing. So it's like the the authoritative and the permissive, right? You know what I mean? Or the authoritarian, let's put it that way. The authoritarian parent and the permissive parent, like going from one extreme to the next, wasn't very good. So I was trying to make my own authoritative, stream of going, okay, we really could use an assessment tool here. And so I actually created one for my own classroom, because I knew we needed something. Nothing was not okay, but too much was a little too much. So, but, some of the teachers, it was really tough to bring some of those teachers around to saying, hey, yes, we do have to do this. This is coming. And in our field, you have to be willing to make that change. Like, that's this is one thing that, more so than anything else, as a teacher, you have to know that each and every day is going to be completely different. And just because they said that you were going to have this assistant at this time on this day, no, you know very well that that might not happen at all. You might have this assistant on this day at this time, because change is always going on. So the organization has to be ready, as well as the individual. So when we started Desired Results, we were all kind of on the same learning curve, all learning about it all at once. And then over time, there were some individuals that were much more open to it and like really picked it up and did a great job from the beginning. and other teachers who really struggled with it for a longer period of time because they just were not open and willing to make that change. Same thing is kind of true when we moved from, our old site in San Marcos to the new site in San Marcos. Nobody wanted to leave our trees, and I didn't want to leave our beautiful, 40-year-old trees that provided us with so much shade and enjoyment and everything else. But we needed to move to a new site. So again, some teachers were much more open to change versus others who were still wanting to pretty much, stay at the old site. We couldn't do that anymore. All right. Mentoring must be an individual approach, so be prepared to adapt your instructional method to fit the teacher and his or her situation. Matching the mentoring strategies to the teacher needs is really important. And there's a whole list of different things on there. I kind of picked up the ones in your textbook that I thought are the most applicable and the most relevant, the ones that I've seen the most over the course of the years and the course of time. So number one is defensiveness. So you might very well come across a teacher who's very defensive. No, I don't do that. No, that doesn't happen in my classroom. And you're like, okay, well, I just saw that happen, or I just saw you do that, or say that, or I just heard you say that. But no, I don't do that. It's not about judging. It's about just, okay, let's figure out what we can do to improve it, okay? So that's what I always say. I say, put the past behind and let's just try to move forward. But some people get very defensive, especially if you're coming in to their classroom and you are giving them feedback, which many times they'll think of as more of a judgment and so forth. So in this case, if they're defensive, there's not much participation at all on their part. The feelings of being overwhelmed, that can definitely happen, especially if somebody maybe does not have enough skill, maybe doesn't have enough education, doesn't have enough experience, and is put into a position that, being the lead teacher and so forth, and maybe they only have 6 or 9 or 12 units, and that could definitely make you feel overwhelmed very easily. And I've known of many people, and you might be one of these, that have kind of been put into that situation and feeling so overwhelmed that you're like, I've got to leave. I need to get out, and you quit one job to go to another site where maybe you're now an assistant, and then you work your way up. So you can't kind of start off at the top. You have to work your way up with everything. Lack of confidence. I know I've come across student teachers and so forth that do lack confidence. Oh, I don't know. I can't do that. Especially when it comes to maybe circle or group times. Oh, yeah, no, I have never done it before. I'm not too sure. That's a really scary one for some people. But over the course of time, we work them through it. Hey, why don't you try a little bit of this? Why don't you just try this part here? Why don't you just try reading a story? Why don't you just try singing a song to begin with? Whatever you feel most comfortable with. And then let's move on to more of the whole part. Doing parts of the circle time versus the whole all at once can sometimes build up that confidence. But again, if we've got that confidence, maybe we need to, give them, like I said, somebody to work with to help them gain their confidence. Interest in new information and new ways of interacting with children. That's what we want to see. So they're probably going to have some specific questions to investigate at this point in time. And then, of course, we want to match that and hopefully give them the answers. And then sometimes they're unsure if permission's granted. So, for instance, if their director or supervisor has given them permission to work with a mentor or not. So sometimes that can also be something that we need to, we need to get some type of agreement together and, MOA or MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, together, so we make sure everybody's on the same page. And yes, the teacher's been given time in which to meet with the mentor. Excuse me. Okay, characteristics of mentoring for teacher inquiry. So when we're talking about instructional coaching, it should include a combination of theory, of demonstration, of practice, and expert feedback. So when we are looking at these things, so there's points in time where I'll come out and I'll say, oh yeah, I remember Piaget? Look, this is happening in action right now. Look, you can see this with the child. Oh yeah, remember maybe it's the conservation theories, right? Something that the tall, skinny glass, the full, tall, skinny glass, the short glass that looks like it's only half full. Are they the same? Remember that from Piaget, this theories of conservation. So sometimes instructional coaching is remember the theory. Remember, Erickson's trust versus mistrust, or autonomy versus shame and doubt. It could come into some of the attachment theories. It could come into Maslow's hierarchy of needs and so forth. So bringing some of that theory in is really important. So you have to hopefully have some of that knowledge, yourself in order to bring that out with the teacher. Demonstration. So hopefully you can demonstrate how to do something. I know that, for instance, like demonstrating how to read a book, how to hold a book at circle time. That's one of the things that I work on a lot, because people, sometimes students don't even know how to hold a book so children can see the pictures. I've seen many teachers like literally look at the children's book, read the words and then show the pictures. But there's a way to do it that you can do both. Demonstrating that, how to do that, giving them the time to practice. And as so okay, practice it, maybe record it, maybe video record it, something like that, so I can see it. But everybody sometimes feels a little nervous about the whole video recording thing. But practice it, so the more you do it. Sometimes it's practicing at home. Read a book at home. I know that I've gone out and read books that I'm like, oh, what, I've done this myself, where I have not read through the entire book before I read it to the children. And I'll never forget, there was this farm book, and we were talking about farm animals and everything. I was like, I just pulled it off the shelf, a farm book, and then I realized, oh, and then at the end, baby Jesus was born. And we're in a state-funded program, and we can't really talk about baby Jesus being born. So, because it was like the farm animals in the manger, but I didn't catch all that when I just pulled it off the shelf, and I just thought it was farm animals. So, practicing is important, definitely, and getting that practice again at home or beforehand, and before you actually do it with the children, can also be helpful. And then expert feedback. So, you are the expert, you're the mentor, so therefore you should be able to give them some feedback that will be positive and encouraging for them to move on to the next step, maybe their next short-term goal. When there was a combination of these areas, the teacher definitely showed better improvement. So they've looked at these things in their research, which we also talked about at the, or I gave you some examples of that, the teacher preparation research and so forth on the websites that were given in the media release for this chapter. So matching the teacher's needs to the mentor's abilities is really, really important. So hopefully you're able to do that. Mentoring, definitely effective mentoring characteristics, and there's some really, some good information. I'm just going to go briefly on this, but mentoring takes time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. Teachers become more confident. They become more able to take risk or wanting to take risk over the course of time, because they can see that this is a good process. But to be an effective mentor, you have to realize that it's going to take time. Nothing's going to happen overnight. In fact, we have something at what I call Palomar time at Palomar College. So we started thinking about building a new lab school at the site in 2003. I remember doing some early work on that, talking about applying for state funding and so forth to get a new site built. Back in 2003, and we didn't open the doors until March of 2016. So some things take time. So mentoring takes time, so you have to be patient with it. Mentoring should also fit the individual and the program and the community. So, you might not be the right mentor for this person. I know that that's happened over the course of time. Sometimes people are like, I don't want to talk to that teacher. I don't want to, working with her doesn't work with me. So, but maybe we find somebody else who does work with that person. And so you should fit the individual and within the program and the community. So for instance, if you are mentoring you come from a Montessori program and you're mentoring somebody who's in a, maybe at an elementary school site, in a program that is a little bit more academic focused and so forth, those two the two programs, the two philosophies might not meet. So it might not fit very well. So be aware of that. Mentoring begins by the mentors noticing strengths. So everybody's got strengths, even if it's, wow, you can really sing to the children, or your ideas for sensory table show great creativity. So those kinds of things. Everybody's got strengths, So even somebody who just has new to the classroom, just 12 units, that kind of thing. Everybody's got strengths, and we can focus on those. Mentoring should be reciprocal. So wanting to be a part of the process, of course, with that change that we've been talking about. Mentoring works best when it's not part of an evaluation. So, for instance, we don't, the person who's doing the mentoring ideally should not also be their direct supervisor, the person who would be giving an evaluation. So if you can have it where it's separate, that is the best situation. So the teacher who's getting mentored doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, this is going to affect my evaluation, and might be less willing to make changes and less willing to be accepting of the mentoring process. And then mentoring has that potential to be transformative. So, definitely, you can see that teacher, go from that caterpillar state to the metamorphosis of the butterfly, and like, wow, you're shining now. Oh my gosh, this is incredible. I've seen it over the course of time. I've seen students who start in our program and they've been in my Child Development 100 class, which I haven't taught for a while, but, I've taught Child Development 100 over the course of years. And they start off there, and now they're finishing their graduates program. Oh my gosh, that is completely and totally transformative. So anyway, they completed our student teaching class, all of those things. So seeing that is really an incredible process. So to be an effective mentor, you have to be aware of these things, and be willing to know that it's not going to happen overnight, and that we need to wait for that transformation. The helping teachers identify interesting questions to investigate. So that the cycle of inquiry begins by turning a teacher's concern, dilemma, or frustration, if you notice that was one of the quiz questions there, into a teacher's question to investigate. So when we do this, we want to join with the teacher. So I don't know, that's interesting. Let's find out more, or maybe asking some more questions. For instance, if they're having a frustration, something that might be let's say the children seem to be running in the classroom. Okay, it might be a concern, a dilemma, or frustration. All right. But running in the classroom. So join with the teacher and say, well, maybe asking some questions to the teacher. When do you notice this? When does this happen? And then hopefully they'll give you feedback on that. Is it a certain time of the day that it happens more often? Is it a certain area of the classroom that it might happen in? So joining with that teacher to go, I can see, that is a frustrating thing. And I know that's happened to me too over the course of time. So, let's find out, maybe asking some more questions with the teacher to get some more information before you go on and give maybe a couple suggestions. So you definitely don't want to give too many suggestions all at once. You want to be, you want to have something there in your back pocket to give them, but not too much. So if the teacher's saying, it's really happening over here in this area. So then that might come into knowing as a mentor that the environment is a huge part of the curriculum. And sometimes moving one area or another area, if we move blocks over closer to dramatic play and we move art over closer to the sink, that might help you with that. Or I know at one point in time I had this shelf kind of in the middle of the room, and children would run around it. So if I put another shelf there, it made it less, kind of like the chase me game, like, oh, you can't get me, kind of a thing. They would run around it happened a few times, and so I was like, okay, we need to change the classroom up. We need to move another shelf here, or a table, or put something here, so children, it's not just a free-for-all to run around. So Don't give too many suggestions at once. So like I said, maybe try moving just one area, 2 areas, swapping them out to see if that helps, and then building upon that over the course of time. And then allow teachers to share ideas and question first. So, what areas do you think might best be moved from, moved around here? Or could we, is there a shelf or is there a table? Could we place it in a different way to help maybe prevent the children from running? So again, and the teacher might say, oh, what if we did this? Great, let's try it. And that's the whole thing too, is being accepting of their ideas. Don't say, oh no, I don't think that's going to work, but being accepting of their ideas. All right. Helping teachers identify, we're still in the same topic, but there's times for a mentor to model the cycle of inquiry. And when we're talking about the cycle of inquiry, remember we're talking about observing. So, and the book really goes into the part of, a teacher saying, okay, I have, like for instance, let's go back to that, children running in the classroom. So it would be good for the teacher to observe. So the teacher needs to start the observation process, with some of those questions. So as a mentor, I'm asking those questions. When does it happen? What areas of the room does it happen? So then I would have them go back and do some observation. Okay, so let's do some observation. Let's see what time of the day or what, or there are certain children. Is it affecting more than others? So we want to make sure that we're supportive in this process to have them do some observation. Now, again, if they're a 12-unit person, they might not have many skills in observation, so we might need to give them some additional information, like, for instance, how to write an anecdotal, or do something like an event sampling or a frequency count. Okay, it happened this time, how many times throughout the day did running occur? We want to reflect on it then and look at our evidence. We want to look at those observations and go, okay, it seems to be happening at this time and in this area, maybe with these 3 children. Okay, so let's see what we can do. Let's first, change the environment. Maybe we change up the schedule a little bit. Maybe it's happening right before lunch and children are getting hungry, and that can be a way to act out and to react to something. So reflecting on that. And then applying, so giving that instructive feedback, the ongoing affirmation. Great, look at this. Oh my gosh, look, you've reduced the running in the room from, 10 times a week to 2 times a week or day or whatever it might be. Oh my gosh, that is incredible. So then they can see how the validity of this cycle of inquiry, the observing, the reflecting, and applying, really can apply to their, we can really take it in their classroom and use it. Not only are we doing with children with our lesson plans and everything, but we do it also with adults, within ourselves, in this mentoring process, which is incredible. We want to expand the cycle of inquiry at some points in time. So after engaging in that observing, reflecting, and applying, mentors should look at the program conditions to support the teacher inquiry. Are there supports or barriers in this process for the teacher? Is there enough materials in the classroom? Is somebody telling me how to set up my classroom, or do I have the freedom to make changes in there? Hopefully you have that ability to make the changes. Do teachers need more information on the observation process? Like I said before, the more education on how to observe. Is the teacher able to practice their skills, make choices, collaborate with others? And sometimes, I know we have this all the time, that one teacher will go and see another teacher at the lab school and say, hey, this just isn't working for me. Can you help me with this? Or another teacher will come in and say, oh, wow, I really like how you did that. I want to try that in my classroom, right? So the teacher running in the classroom, that situation, again, if we had that and the teacher was able to practice their skills, move things around, make some choices, and then, kind of have a, oh, this worked today, oh, this didn't work that day. So let's maybe now we need to try to move 2 or 3 other centers to make it, to really make it work. But many of the assessment questions come with time and experience. So somebody new might not even think about the environment. The setup of the classroom is why the children are running. They might just be totally frustrated, like, oh my gosh, these kids run all the time. I can't get them to stop running. I'm always trying to control their running and everything. Well, if you just move some of the things in the classroom, that might help. But again, that comes with experience. So that's why you're the mentor and they're the teacher, and hopefully you're going to be able to expand upon that. After a few meetings, you need to go back to that professional development plan that was created. and make sure that you review your goals. Are the goals getting met? Are there new insights? Okay, great. We've solved the running. We moved these 3 areas around. It really helped to pathway, not for, say, not to get out the door or anything like that, but to block it within the classroom so children are not seeing this as a thoroughfare in order to run through. So new insights. Okay, well now we did that, but now, you know what? Now that I've got dramatic play next to the library, that's not working, right? So it's like, okay, so we got the active areas and the quiet areas. We want to kind of separate those, right? So new insights that now we can start working on that, and maybe we decide, okay, we need to move the library areas somewhere else. Any resources needed, so maybe it might be activities, it might be curriculum books, it might be just finding resources online. I know that was one of the things that as a young teacher, this was long before the internet was where the internet is today. But finding those resources, I went out and got books. My first teaching job, and I'm spending all my first paycheck on curriculum books because I need ideas. But so gathering those resources, letting them borrow, because you might have a lot of books and ideas and ways in which you've organized, and allow them to borrow those things. Mentoring, development, and self-reflection. So there's that great reflection. Sorry, I cannot speak right now. But the self-assessment for your own self-reflection, and you'll find it there on page 117. And so that's for you. That's not for the teacher. That's for you to, I'd suggest making a copy of it. Take it before, do a little assessment on yourself before you start a mentoring relationship. And then, review it during, review it after, repeat as needed, of course. Where have you grown as a mentor? Where do you still see that you need some work? Like I said, I know for myself, sometimes I can get a little too excited about things and a little too overzealous on certain things. And then I have to tone myself back because I know not everybody's ready for that. So, I know that's can be one of those areas that I need to work on. The other thing, too, is you can ask the teacher for some feedback. And he or she might be able to give you some ideas as to, like, this, I really appreciated when you did this, but, when you asked me this question, that really kind of hurt my feelings, or maybe didn't, I kind of took offense to it or something like that. I'm like, oh, okay. And so asking for feedback, that can also help us as a mentor grow in this process. All right, the last thing is a summary here. Mentors need to be aware of adult actions and comments, just like teachers need to be aware of children in these ways. So we have to be aware of our actions, and what we say and how we say it and what we do can definitely affect the teachers, hopefully in a positive way and not a negative way. An inquiry approach may lead to sustaining adult learning because it involves qualities of best education. So, wanting them to ask those questions. And again, if we see somebody who's just really not into it, maybe this is not the field for them. Inquiry is an active process, of course, and always asking, always trying to gain more information over the course of time. And support teachers so they see themselves as capable of identifying a problem, observing, and making an action plan based on what they learn. So, you can start solving some of these things on your own once you get some of this experience under your belt. That I've got this problem, I'm going to observe it, and then I'm going to make a plan. And even at that point in time, even if you're not in a mentoring relationship, you might just even go and ask again for that collaboration with another teacher or maybe a supervisor to say, hey, I'm still having this problem. Can you help me? This is what I've seen. This is the problem. This is what I've seen, and maybe we can create a plan together. All right, make sure that you ask any questions on the general discussion board that relate to this chapter. Again, everybody's going to benefit from your questions, my responses, and your classmates' responses. So, all right, thank you so much, and have a great day.